everybody's time. I'm going to go ahead and, let's see, get us started here. Give me, just a minute, because I've...
Hey, Alex.
lost y'all.
Senator.
Okay. I want to just put my participants down. All righty. So, good morning and welcome to the fourth of our Shift, Sustain, and Succeed series. We welcome everyone to join us each Tuesday and Thursday as we do our best to answer your questions, the most pressing questions our businesses have in navigating COVID-19. Last Friday, the governor announced that Venango County was among those who would move to phase yellow, opening businesses on May 8th and lifting the stay-at-home order. These businesses join those who were among the essential businesses by order or by waiver who have remained open, and several who were added last week, which included construction and golf courses. As we navigate these phases, we must all keep in mind that there continue to be unknowns. I'll remind everyone that the rules keep changing. Some of them may not have even been written. Every one of the presenters joining us is in a position that makes them vulnerable in providing absolutes and advice. This is even more the case in leadership. So today's guest, Senator Scott Hutchinson, joins us to provide his insight, but also what is going through this pandemic for the first time with the rest of us. I appreciate his leadership and his willingness to talk to us today and perhaps answer some questions. Also joining us is Alex Halper, the Director of Governmental Affairs for the Pennsylvania Chamber of Business and Industry. We will be recording today's session. And I'll remind you that if you have any questions that we haven't asked, please submit them in the Zoom chat. We'll do our best to include them towards the end of today, or we'll follow up with you later. So with that, let's get started, Scott. Again, welcome and thank you for joining us. We just said it's a beautiful day here in Pennsylvania. The sun is shining outside here in Oil City. So the governor has provided us with a plan for Pennsylvania, outlining relief, reopening, and recovery, and now guidelines more specific about the phases. So I'm going to ask today, let's start with a win. What's gone well in terms of mitigating risk for our communities and in supporting business?
Well, first off, I'll say we here in Venango County, and actually most of rural Pennsylvania, have been very patient, very diligent, and the numbers have shown that we are ready to reopen. And in any way, some people would say maybe we never should have closed, but there's a lot of uncertainty out there. So we did do a prudent thing and slow the economy down, try to catch a breather, but now it's really time to get back to work. And thank goodness most of our local counties have been moved into the yellow category, which will allow a phased reopening. It's still not across the board, but many more businesses will be permitted to be open, and we will still obviously and prudently have to practice good social distancing, other precautions like masks and cleaning and all those kind of things. But in the end, we can start opening businesses. And I'm really pleased that Venango County is part of that first wave. Out of the 5 counties I represent, 4 of those are in the yellow category now, but several others that seem to be number-wise similar are not included in that. And we'll probably get to discuss that a little bit more later, but I am happy that the bulk of my district is ready to move forward. And that's a testament to the people here who've, been very patient. It's been heart-wrenching for many businesses and will continue to be. And that's unfortunate. I hear those stories every day, and it's some sad stories, but now it's time for us to get things moving again.
Great. Well, are there programs and services that were set up for this type of a crisis in Pennsylvania? In your opinion, were we ready for this?
I don't think anybody was ready for it. Unfortunately, the state seemed to be caught flat-footed in some of our administrative functions. On the one hand, I am pleased the way we were able to recover several things very quickly, very bipartisan way. For the first time ever, we implemented rules very quickly so that local governments as well as state government, could operate electronically, and that's first time in history. We did that very quickly. I've been meeting 99% of the things I've been involved with have been online, but the flip side of that is things like our unemployment comp system, which was undergoing before this an overhaul of their computer system. They got just crushed. They weren't ready for the numbers. And the reflection of that comes through my office too, because lots of frustrated employees, employers are calling our office, and there's not a whole lot we can do. We try our best to get through that system, but it's just a huge backlog. And I think Alex maybe you want to talk a little bit about the legacy system they have at UC and how that has really caught us off guard. Department of Health, maybe they've been pretty good on this, but still they need more help too. So we were not completely ready. You can never be ready for all this stuff, but you can try to do your best.
Alex, is there anything you'd like to add to what the senator's saying?
Well, certainly the unemployment compensation situation has been a huge focus, both in terms of the government response to the pandemic, as well as a lot of the challenges that employers are experiencing. But the senator is absolutely right. We had significant issues with the UC system prior to all this. The department is operating on a decades-old mainframe system that was in the process of being updated and supposedly being making some progress on that front, but was not done in time to be functional and operational when this massive surge came in. We have issues with the UC law itself that just inherently creates an inefficient, slow system. So when you go from having 20,000 claims for unemployment compensation to 1.7, 1.8 million claims, on the one hand, it was almost inevitable that we would have problems, but there were also other circumstances that went into some of the challenges that we're experiencing, and we're hoping that perhaps this is an opportunity to create a more efficient, streamlined system. Because we talk to many employers, and they are as heartbroken as I've heard that their own people who they've had to furlough or let go are not able to qualify for or get the process started or receive their unemployment check. So there's a lot of ground to cover on UC. I don't want to get totally bogged down in that, but certainly echo the senator's points. I mean, there are areas where state government has been able to respond, but certainly in other areas it has been very disheartening.
Yes.
Well, thank you, both of you. As we move to reopening, our chamber is an advocate for more discretion to be given at county and local level. What are you doing to move us in this direction? And can you tell us what the barriers are to that?
Certainly, Sue, that has been a really important item, in my opinion, something that we in the Senate recognized early on that Pennsylvania is a very diverse state. We have different lifestyles, different distance between where people live, different capabilities, healthcare wise, et cetera. And so early on, we passed in the Senate a bill which was Senate Bill 327, And that bill would have allowed the county commissioners or the county council in those counties that have a different form of government. It would allow them to put together a plan of which businesses can open, which cannot. They would have to base that plan on CDC guidelines published by the federal government. And of course, all safety precautions would have had to be in place for those that did open. But it would have allowed local discretion for more businesses to be opened from the time that bill got done, and we passed that early on. It has bogged down in the House, mostly because the governor is saying he is against that idea. I think we have very capable local leaders. I think they're not going to do rash things, but they have their fingers on the pulse of the local communities, and would have been, at the very least, their input should have been sought out in the statewide movement, and that really has not been the case, unfortunately. So I'm still hopeful that something along those lines can move forward, because remember, this yellow category is only a partial reopening. So I'm still hopeful that we can get to some greater local input, at the very least, if not greater local control over that ability to reopen. So as I said, we did pass that in the Senate several weeks ago, but it has bogged down since then.
Great. Well, thank you. I'm going to remind everyone that I have started my screen shares, and we are, if you haven't read the governor's plan or seen the phases, those are linked on our website. So you can visit venangochamber.org, Shift, Sustain, Succeed, and review some of those documents that are readily available.
Hey, Susan.
Mm-hmm.
If I may just make,
Sure.
just to add briefly onto the senator's response in terms of local involvement, as counties are, restrictions on employers are loosened, employers are still required to adhere to many different types of requirements in terms of their workplace safety, adhering to OSHA and CDC and State Department of Health guidelines. And, increasingly, it's not entirely clear how enforcement of those requirements will be conducted. And that is something where I think the expectation is for local elected officials, local law enforcement, and other local agencies will kind of be tasked with that. But that's going to create, an interesting dynamic. We certainly believe and have seen and experienced employers, operating the right way and doing what they need to do to ensure the health and safety of their employees and customers. But how that plays out as employers are able to open and resume operations, there's going to be more and more of a local focus.
Alex, thanks for adding that. I think that's really important. Perhaps some of you have seen, I'll kind of hold up here real quick, the really simplified version of green, red, yellow, green, I guess is the order it would go in. The governor's directives that came out Friday are much more extensive, and I particularly took note of page 5, which talks about enforcement. So I think that's a really important point, because you may choose to interpret things more loosely, but in there is the list of, many of our businesses are subject to licenses that maybe will be controlled at a different level. So, certainly our counsel would be to kind of know who you're dealing with in your particular industry. I am curious though, as there are businesses that are named as not being included kind of in the move to yellow and being able to reopen. Do you think that as we make this movement and step into yellow, that there could be additional revisions coming, and any idea of how frequently those will be visited?
I mean, there are several glaring examples that I think and hope will be addressed. I know that as a legislature, we've already talked about several of these things, like salons, hair care kinds of place, because they seem to be an easy business that's able to limit the number of folks there, as well as use safety precautions. That seems like one that should be added among others. And a lot of that has to do with public pressure. You saw, we've heard a lot about real estate. We've heard real estate transactions. Public pressure got movement on that. Same with car dealerships and those construction early on was completely shut down. Public pressure got that moved. So I'm hoping that there's some flexibility to allow more common sense openings as we move forward.
I'm going to just throw something in here, not a question, but a comment. I think that's one of the reasons why I would encourage listeners that, one, we hope you're supporting your local chambers, because we advocate for what is in our region and what we believe is best here. But also, if you have a trade association or someone that's industry specific, perhaps you haven't supported or reached out to them, this is a great time to do that. They know what the specific strengths and weaknesses are in your industry, and many of them are foregoing any kind of membership or fees right now, but they're well worth them if they're asking for them. So it's a really good time to do that. I know that Scott hears from those lobbyists. It's not always something we think highly of, but the truth is, when you're looking for someone to advocate for your specific industry, they sometimes can get the attention of the governor's office or an elected official you need. Any thoughts on that, Alex?
Well, I would echo the senator and thank him and his colleagues for keeping up that pressure. As the senator noted, there's legislation that's been introduced to open or allow particular industries to resume operations. And there is this interesting trend we've seen over the last few weeks that the senator sort of alluded to, where the legislation does not gain momentum. It would likely be vetoed by the governor, I would suspect, if it actually got to his desk. But then in subsequent days, there is administrative action taken to allow these industries to resume. So construction is a great example. Automobile dealerships and alike, and real estate, where the legislature talking about it and moving legislation has that intended effect. We believe there are other areas. We've seen for example, the state stores, the LCB, being authorized to resume limited operations and curbside service. We've heard from many chamber members that they believe they could operate in a similar way to limit person-to-person contact, but still be able to sell their goods through curbside pickup. If it works for the PLCB, it's hard to understand why it couldn't work for private retailers. But keeping up that pressure, even though you may not see a bill signing like that, it does create, we believe and hope, some pressure behind the scenes to allow these businesses to resume operations in a safe and healthy manner.
Great. So in that regard, my encouragement to businesses is don't give up hope, but think carefully about your strategy, how you will do the right thing and be part of a common voice within your industry and within your community and within your chamber community. Scott, the Venango County is number one. And I do, let me explain real quickly. Senator Hutchinson, I would say respectfully, Scott and I go way back. We graduated high school together. So if you don't mind, I'm going to keep calling you Scott.
To everybody, actually. That's my name.
Great. Well, Venango County's number of confirmed cases continues to be very low at 7 currently. Can you tell us about Senate Bill 1110, its status, and how it will assist in protecting our first responders and in turn our community?
Sure. again, we are blessed to have so many folks in the healthcare emergency response areas that they're going about their business every single day. They are responding to ambulance calls or to fire calls or police calls. They're going on the scene, and that has not ended. They are 24/7 operations. But one of the things that because of some vagaries around the sharing of information, we've been in a place where the Department of Health will not allow the 911 centers to have information about specific cases. And our emergency response community has said, we want to know if we are entering a dangerous situation, a situation where there are affected people in a house, for example, just so they know it, so they can take extra precautions, of course, especially early on, but it continues to be the case that there are shortages or at least a not an endless supply of safety equipment. So they want to make sure that they have that safety equipment employed when, the extra stuff, when they are going into a house where maybe somebody has already been tested positive, and they just want to know that, and it would be confidential. It would be strictly between the 911 center and the responder themselves, and it's actually federal penalties if it goes further than that. But the Department of Health has not been willing to share that specific information about households, and so Senate Bill 1110 would say they would have to share that information. I think it's common sense. It keeps our emergency responders safe, and actually, if you really think about it, it keeps the coronavirus from spreading via those emergency responders. If they go into a house not knowing, that maybe they get infected and bring it home, and more people get infected. So it's a prudent and I think smart thing to do, and again, pushback from the Department of Health. But I think it's the right thing to do, and that bill has passed the Senate. It's in the House, and it's supposed to be coming out of committee in the House next week.
Great. The governor continues to refer to a data-driven approach to reopening. In fact, I listened to Dr. Levine the other day, and if I could have had a nickel for every time the word data was used. Can you help us understand what the data is that is being used to make decisions around reopening and businesses?
Well, I mean, the interesting thing is, obviously there is some very high profile publicly available data that we know about, and it's talked about every single day. The number of tests that have been taken, the number of confirmed cases, the number of deaths, the number of folks who require ICU treatment or that require the use of a respirator. All those kind of numbers, very open to the public, announced every day. A few times they've been forced to alter those numbers because they were being interpreted the wrong way. However, beyond that, a lot of it is black box numbers that we may or may not know. And they are, I know the Department of Health has been working with several institutions of higher learning. CMU is one of those, Carnegie Mellon. And they have these models, but we do not know what all the inputs are that go into those to make predictions or to help them make decisions. I will, lots of questions have been asked about the data and what exactly goes into those decisions about who can reopen, who can't. And it was interesting. I think it was just yesterday, the governor himself said, yes, there is subjectivity in there. So it's not all data driven. There's some data. I think the frustrating part is a lot of communities, and I'll use Butler as the example because Butler is in my district. I've worked closely with the commissioners there. Their numbers, their public numbers are very comparable to all the counties that did open. And before the announcement last week of the counties in the yellow category, at least a week prior to that, the commissioners there said they directly communicated with the governor's office and said, is there anything else we can provide to you? Any weaknesses of why you think we wouldn't be eligible come next week when the announcement would be made? You know, what can we do to prove to you that we are ready to open? And they heard nothing back, and they were not part of that yellow category. So that frustrating part is not knowing what's out there, because maybe there are things that we know about that would change their mind about what the numbers are, or our capacity to treat people, those kind of things. But it's not all cut and dried numbers. There are lots of numbers, but it's not all numbers. There's some subjectivity there, and that's what's made it very frustrating.
Yeah, frustrating indeed. I for one love data. I like to make decisions based on what we know, and I think, you know, with respect to all leadership, you know, to the governor and the president, we're dealing with something we've never dealt with before. So even determining what data is important has got to be hard for them. So I do respect that they're in a very, very difficult position. So speaking of frustration, now that many of our businesses have received PPP loans to be forgiven and EIDL funding, what role does the state play in assisting in loan forgiveness? I know that those are really SBA programs, which are federally funded, but with all the frustration, some of that gets directed, you know, locally and across the state. Scott, you may want to comment, but Alex, you might even have insight on kind of where things sit with Pennsylvania businesses and those loans.
Yeah, I'll just say really quick, this is really federal territory. And maybe we'll get into it later. I think we will, that the state really doesn't have any money. The federal government can print money and or borrow money, and that's why they've funded these kinds of programs. This, you know, as we'll talk later, the state budgetary situation is going to be very difficult. So we really are not on the front lines of those kinds of programs, and maybe Alex could chat a little bit about those from his perspective.
Sure. In terms of loan forgiveness, and you know that there is a distinction between the EIDL loans, EIDL, and the PPP loans. The EIDL loans, with the exception of you know, some employers qualified for that immediate upfront grant, which you know, which is not a loan, which is forgivable. The rest of the EIDL loan is not forgivable. It's, you know, it can be repaid under fairly favorable terms. The PPP loan is potentially forgivable, and there are rules that explain how to qualify for forgiveness. Generally, they want you to utilize at least 75% of the loan for payroll purposes. You know, there was and still is some concern, and this is where the state comes into to a certain extent. We were hearing from employers, and still do, that they were asking employees to come back to work, to come back on payroll in order to hit that 75% threshold necessary for forgiveness. And we're finding that employees were resisting, were opting instead to remain collecting unemployment compensation benefits. In some cases, they were able to make more on unemployment as opposed to going back on payroll. This was kind of further exasperated by some comments from the administration that sort of encouraged this trend, which we've been trying to bring some awareness to both employers and employees who actually could be inadvertently committing fraud if they turn down suitable work. We have since gotten some guidance from the Treasury Department that they're going to try to work with employers who are in that situation, who are not able to get people back on payroll. But in terms of the role of the state, again, the forgiveness on the PPP will really be a function of the Small Business Administration and your local lender. Where the state comes in, though, is whether those forgiven loans will be taxed. Those grants are not subject to federal tax, but they are putting it on the states to decide whether state or local taxes can apply. The House has passed, I think it's House Bill 2408, that initially was introduced to exempt your stimulus, checks going to individuals. Those are not taxed. We advocated for, and we're happy to see an amendment added that would say your PPP forgiven loans will not be subject to state or local taxation. That bill is in the, like I said, just recently passed the House, and we're hopeful that can get it passed the House unanimously. We were happy to see, and hopefully that can get across the finish line.
Great, thank you for that. While some things really do sit more with state or more with federal, I know Alex and I work, with the chamber industry, and sometimes it's our united voice across the state level that then, can actually move things at a federal level. So again, the importance of a unified voice of businesses coming together. So we have hit and crossed the 30-minute mark, but I have a few more questions. So I'm hoping that people might want to hang in with us. We respect those who might need to drop off at 30 minutes. But if Alex and Scott, if you're willing, we'll continue for a few more things. So what other legislative actions are currently in motion, COVID related or otherwise, that Scott, you might want constituents to know about right now?
Obviously, all the COVID-related stuff has really been front and center, as well it should be, allowing, we have tried to be the people's voice and say more input is needed on certain of these big decisions that were made. And obviously, when they're made in a short term, maybe it can be forgiven that things aren't done as well as they could have. But now that we've had some time to assess how the state has moved forward, we in the legislature have tried to say, here's some ideas that we are hearing, things, for example, the businesses we talked about earlier that we advocated for reopening, for allowing more local input. Those kinds of things have bubbled up through the legislature and will continue to be part of discussions forward, because we are the people's voice, and we are in our communities hearing what folks think about things. So it is interesting that obviously COVID related stuff has taken all the oxygen out of the room. But before this, late last year, early this year, one of the major things that the legislature was beginning to work on was a package of bills to help our volunteer fire and emergency services systems. There was a big SR6 report that worked on over several years with input from emergency responders, and we were setting goals to get a lot of that passed. I still think we can get a lot of that going forward. It's more longer term things, but it's the things to make sure we have people that are going to show up when emergencies happen. So I'm hopeful we can get back on track with some of that longer term stuff to help our local emergency responders. The other thing that's really going to be tough this year. We have a budget, and it's due by July 1st. It's the operating plan for state government for the next 12 months, starting July 1. And we have some major issues now. The budget office has projected between the rest of this fiscal year and into next year that we're going to be down $4 billion. And that's going to make decision making very difficult. And on top of that, not only is the number lower, the ability to predict that number is very dicey. We have to make so many assumptions. We don't know for sure. And that's why some people, myself included, have advocated for a shorter term budget to say, let's fund government essential services for the next 4 to 6 months, and then maybe have a better handle on what else we're able to do for the rest of the fiscal year. That is in discussions, but in the end, I guess I'm sending a warning out or telegraphing the fact that many organizations, local governments, other entities that rely on state money, it's going to be a tough year. And I just want to remind everybody that, and you know, we're going to do our best, but it's a difficult time.
Sure. Yeah. You know, of course, Scott, all of our organizations and businesses are in the same boat as we look at budgets. We prepared pretty confidently, actually going into a good, strong year. So we're all pulling those out and trying to figure out, you know, how long will last. So with that, you know, I shared with you in the last few days that I sent a letter to the governor asking for more discretion at local level, advocating for those businesses who were left out of stage yellow. I'm curious if you can tell us, you know, how do we help you represent our region better? Are there ways that you need our help in getting the message to the governor, and what's the most effective way to do that? That's kind of a big question. Oh, we have you muted, Scott. Sorry.
So it is important that I know what your priorities are, things that are of particular impact that the state government can step in, and we hear a lot of that here already, and it makes me a better representative of your ideas when I hear from folks. So always glad to hear that. But really, when you're talking in this specific time about advocating, getting our economy moving again, I get it. That's my priority right now. I don't know that the governor's office is quite on board with all that yet. So my advice is to contact the governor's office directly, you know, and there are websites and stuff, but and then make sure we know that you have done that. That constant pressure is what has made the movement we have had, and will continue to be important to get more movement to allow us to safely open up our economy and safely open up our community again, so that people can.
Great. For those who would like to see the letter that I sent to the governor, it is on our resource page, and I think we'll either have provided there or we'll be providing as follow-up to this session the governor's address, an email address we had, you know, some instructions on how you might forward information. But I'd also encourage you, along with letting Scott and Representative Lee, James, and Congressman Thompson know when you're communicating to the governor. If you'd let us know at the chamber, we'll, you know, try to join you in those things where we have consensus. So we did have a question submitted. I'm going to throw in here real quick. How do you know how employers calculate the number of customers that they can allow into their business? Has there been direction on that?
In certain cases, I think that they give it a hard number, but I don't know that that's, I don't know. No.
Okay, we'll do some follow up on that, and and see if we can get that information out and maybe even put up on a resource page. So I'll do a little bit of research on that today and see if we can give some direction. So there are elections coming up, primary and general this year. Can you tell us, both Senator Hutchinson and Alex, if you have any opinions on what you think those will look like? Of course, I think the primary is in July.
June.
Or
June.
June.
Actually, that one of the that was interesting. That was part of its serendipity. Last year, long before this, Pennsylvania relaxed the ability of people to vote by mail, and as we move forward, that was. It sounds like we were brilliant, that we knew that this was going to happen, but we weren't. But be that as it may, you are permitted to vote by mail. I think that's a smart choice for many, many people. It saves frail folks from going out in public. It allows those working at the polls to be in a safer place. This is a primary, and there's at the top of the ticket, there's not a race at this point. So really, you would be voting by mail for the rest of the races, and I think I'm encouraging people to vote by mail as much as possible. But we still, for people who aren't comfortable doing that, they can go to the polls. They will be open. I think. We also relaxed now because of this emergency declaration. We did relax the placing of where the precincts are. I don't know if Venango County is going to change where any of the voting locations are, but they do have the flexibility to do that. And as the National Conference of the State Legislators testified before the Senate last couple days ago, they said Pennsylvania is in a good place because we have a hybrid system. We're not all mail. We're not all show up on election day. So I encourage people to vote and do it whichever way you feel comfortable. We did extend it to June 2nd to give more time for the counties to be ready. And I think they are ready, willing, and able to do things. The only caveat I'm going to say, I know we love to see immediate results. You're probably not going to see that. It's going to take a long time to count the mail-in ballots. It may be a day or two before we know who wins things. So we live in this instant society. Instant is not going to be as instant as it normally is, I don't think. But it is important for us to vote.
Great. We did get a comment from Commissioner Abramovic that we're not changing any precincts in the primary here in Venango County. So
yes, all my counties are. Yes. Okay.
Yeah. Great. So we're winding down here, but Scott, like I said at the beginning of the call, we've been friends for a long time, known each other for a very long time, and I think it's important to ask you how you're doing. How is your family? You are community members and friends here in Venango County. How are you managing? Your girls are in different places, huh?
Thanks for asking, Sue. We've had a large mix of impacts in our family. We are all in good shape. I have two daughters. One who lives and works in Detroit. She worked for several weeks, but then was laid off. But she was called back. So she's doing well. My other daughter. We are blessed because I hate to say it, but she lives and works in New York City. She happened to be out of town right when things hit. She was out of New York City, was on a trip and changed her flight plans to come to Oil City. She was laid off. So she's been here at home with us on unemployment, but we feel much safer that she's in our community. New York City's had some big struggles. And we have our youngest daughter, of course, is college student, and she's been finishing her semester online. My mother's a block away, and she's an 89-year-old living by herself. So we have to keep our eyes on her, but she's doing well too. We've been very blessed. My thoughts and thanks go out to so many people in our community that are going the extra mile to make their lives work. Some who may have been have health issues or family members with health issues, but also those who go up to work and keep the rest of us safe every day. I'm very blessed at this time. I think we all are. We have a great community, and we have some really standout people that are operating our hospitals, our firemen, police, people that are other businesses that are critical, and they're going to work every day, and that's been wonderful.
Great. That's really a perfect note to end on. I do want to, I don't see any other questions in the chat. I certainly want to invite Alex or Scott, any parting comments other than that?
Again, my congratulations and thanks to the people of Venango County and surrounding communities. Lots of angst and persistence, but in the end, people have had a great attitude about things. We are resilient, and we're going to get things going again. I'm blessed to live here, and I think we have some wonderful people around here.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you, Scott and Alex, and for joining us today. I also want to thank Scott's Chief of Staff, Justin Leventree, who assisted us in organizing for today, and of course Tessa, who is the really my support team here during these calls. I want to refer you to our website where you'll see ongoing updates and information as we learn it here at the Chamber. Also, the contact information that I've posted now for Senator Hutchinson and Alex Halper at the Pennsylvania Chamber of Business and Industry. I also want to remind you that we have ongoing calls. So next Tuesday, May the 12th, we'll be talking about disinfecting your workplace, PPE, how you bring your people back on staff and do it safely, make sure that you're compliant with OSHA rules and such. And we have more great sessions planned. I welcome input.